Established in 2001, Returning to Spirit provides healing and reconciliation workshops nationwide. A mother, grandmother, and residential school survivor, Executive Director Lisa Raven applies her experiences and expertise to the idea of reconciliation, working with people to help them move forward from what has been keeping them stuck in life.
My name is Lisa Raven, and I'm from Hollow Water First Nation. I'm the Executive Director of Returning to Spirit, but I'm also a certified trainer. So been with the organization since 2007. I'm a mother to 3 and a grandmother to 1.
Cool. I'm really excited to learn more about Returning to Spirit. For our audience, what is Returning to Spirit?
Returning to Spirit is a nonprofit charitable organization that was established in 2001. And we've been doing healing and reconciliation workshops all across the country. We've been in most of the provinces and 2 of the 3 territories throughout the years. And we don't usually market. It's mostly word of mouth. So people, hey, you know what, you should take this. And that's how we get our invitations to communities all across the country. Returning to Spirit was first established to address the residential school legacy back in the early 2000s, so in 2001. And so we've been doing reconciliation work for the past 20 plus years, long before the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was even established. So for us, we hold ourselves as experts almost in the idea of reconciliation.
If you've been doing this for 20 years, I would consider you, yes, experts in this category. Wow, I didn't realize it was around for so long. And I mean, with all the news that we've been seeing, with Fairy Creek and there's so much issues right now within Indigenous communities. Learning about reconciliation and going through these workshops is more important than ever. What does a reconciliation workshop look like?
We come at our reconciliation kind of backwards. So we don't tell people how or what they need to do to reconcile. In fact, we go around it the opposite way. And so we show people what's in front of this idea of reconciliation. So what are the barriers? Our method is that once you can show people what's in front or what's blocking, what's stopping, then you can actually do something about it. So it's the awareness that there is other obstacles and there are other factors in play other than just let's bring two sides together and reconcile. So when we look at reconciliation, and so we were founded wanting to reconcile or resolve the legacy of residential school. So I'm going to use that example through this model. All right. And so let's say over here, that is indigenous people. And the little X here, that is residential school or a person's experience around residential school. So when that happened, and whatever happened, it could have been they got their hair cut, they were forced to pray, they could have been abused there, and are not allowed to speak their language, punished for that. And so it generates all types of feelings and all types of thoughts. Right. And so we are naturally born into the world, trusting everybody and thinking everybody is safe, thinking the world around us is, amazing. It's to be explored. It's a safe place. But then something happens, and that's the X. Something happens that kind of shakes our faith, right, in ourselves, in people, and in the world. And so we start to create a narrative about that. And we call that a story. So we start creating a narrative about the other or about life. And it could be, people are mean, people are bad, right? You can't trust people. And then there's anger, there's resentment, that gets built up, through the years. And it's not just one event, right? Because so most of us, we have many, many events that have happened throughout the course of our lives. And we just keep building upon that story. And so what happens is it creates like an already listening, right? And so an already knowing. So because we've had, these experiences, we make a decision or we make a belief that people are this way, the world is this way, or I am this way. And it's an assumption that we make about the other, but it comes from a place of knowing because it's experiential based, right? And so we already know how the other people are. We already know what's going to happen. We already know what this is like. And then so we start doing things and being a particular way in accordance with that story. So if that means, okay, white people or the church, they're not safe. So then I will start taking on those behaviors, that demonstrate that. Or if I think I need to protect myself against them, they're going to hurt me, they can't be trusted, then I would take on that, that way of being and start doing those things that are in line with that belief system. And what's so powerful about it is that it's wired into our bodies, right? So because it's an experience, so those feelings, they're hardwired into our bodies. And so we can feel it, right? So every time we get triggered, we can feel it in our body, and it creates either a fight or a flight type of feeling. And you could feel it, in your throat, in your stomach, maybe you get all tense or, anxiety, right? And
you're hitting very close to home right now.
Yeah. And because, it's like a cycle. So we keep kind of recycling this thought pattern and then those feelings, we start to see it like that's the truth then. Right. So then, no, here's all my evidence. Here's all these past experiences. So they are like that. We do have to, handle them this way. And so it becomes the truth, the absolute truth, whatever it is that we're believing. And eventually, if you hold, disempowering beliefs and, experiences like that, it's not like you have a point of view, but you become that. Right. And so if you're like a residential school survivor, it's like you become that and you take on all of it, whether it's a bullying, persona, or if it's a victimhood persona. Right. And so you not only have a point of view about particular things, especially the past or history, you become that. And, and that's a real extreme, because it's not like point of views are bad. Like everybody has a point of view about everything, whether it's like, who has the best coffee, McDonald's or Tim Hortons? Well, that's just a point of view, but nobody goes to war per se, right? Or else cuts off relationships because, they're true Tim Hortons fans, right? So that's happening, on one side. But what happens on one side is actually also happening on the other. So, if on this side, this is the church or the administrators of residential school, the event in their past, the event in their space could be, residential school. And for them, that creates feelings as well, whether that's, embarrassment, guilt, shame, regret, whatever, or it could be resentment too, because it's not like 100% of the people who were involved in residential school, were actually the ones doing the harm, but it's like everybody gets painted with the same brush. And so that could create, even a silent, even a resentment or an anger. Like, why am I being blamed for this? I had nothing to do with this. Exactly. And it doesn't happen that way. Everybody gets painted with the same brush. It's black and white. There is no room for shades of gray in this situation. So on the other side, that could create, its own story, its own narrative. Like, oh, we're always being blamed. Oh, like I can't speak, and like nobody's even speaking about the good things, because surely there was good things that happened there too. It couldn't have been all bad, And so that creates an already listening on this side too. And that could sound like, oh, here it comes, I'm going to be blamed. Oh, here it comes, I'm going to be attacked, right? And so they take on, their own way of handling that, whatever that is, if that's to withdraw, if that's to isolate, if that's to just, whatever it is, or to be savior. Right. So it's okay. I need to fix this. I need to do whatever I can to fix this. And so it sets in motion something else on the other side too. And you can feel that, right, in your body. Like, I'm making an assumption here, but my sense is that, most non-Indigenous people have a radar for when they need to be walking on eggshells, right? When they're in a conversation, with an Indigenous person, and you can feel tension when there's something in the space, and that's what's in the space is all this stuff. So, whatever, so the same thing happens. So they take on, their absolute truth, their position, and their point of view, whatever that looks like. So that exists in the space. No matter what the issue is, if it's residential school, if it's anytime there's two opposing points of view, all of those components are in the space. We can see that in Canada, even last year, let's say these are the freedom truckers, right? And B is everyone who's not a freedom trucker. Well, you can see, there's a point of view, there's a belief system there's assumptions, there's judgments, all of it on both sides. And it's highly emotionally charged. So if you were to bring two people, who believe the two opposites like that and try to reconcile, it's going to go up like a tinderbox, because there are feelings and emotions that are attached. So, it shows up, between a husband and a wife, especially if they're going through a divorce or something. The wife's got a huge story about the husband, and the same on this side, right? And so that is what gets in the way, of reconciliation. And the thing about it is that it's fluid, right? It's an organic thing. So sometimes it's right in the space, and most times it's actually off to the side, right? We all have these about, certain issues in our lives. Most of the time they leave us alone. They're out in the background, right? But when we get triggered, when we get reminded, about something that is, reminds us of that, it has the tendency to boomerang. And it boomerangs right back into the front with as much power and passion that it had, in the beginning. And that's when it starts to cause us trouble, because, when we get into this space, there's no possibilities there. There's no hope there. It's just like, forget it. I'm out of here. I don't even want to be in relationship with this person anymore, because it's a push, right? It's like who's right, who's wrong, who's stronger, who's what
weaker. Is it like
an
an immovable object in an unstoppable force?
What we've been experiencing, especially since the first discoveries in Kamloops, right? So is that if something from the past, an event from the past, if it's not resolved, if it's not completed or healed, it has the tendency to come back. So, the conversations around residential school, they started in the early 2000s, right? And back then, it was between, residential school survivors and the people, who taught in the schools or the church. At least in our organization, that's who we originally worked with. And then, it kind of goes underground, this thing, right? And it's kind of out of people's space. There was compensation, there was, an apology, there was all of this. And then Kamloops, and then boom. So for 80,000 or 100,000 people across Canada, they get re-triggered, and all of their stuff comes back full front with the same, with the same emotional capacity, right, that it had back then. So then people are like bringing that back, re-triggering that, as if none of the steps that we've made in the last 20 years mattered. And that is, I think what people don't understand is that if you don't resolve something, it comes back and it recreates itself. Because, if I look at residential school, well, to me, the most hurtful part of residential school was taking kids away from their families and their communities, their homes. To me, that was at the core of it. And, the last school closed down in 1996. So that system is no longer in operation. It's finished. It's done. It's over. But it's not complete because of that emotional attachment. And because it hasn't been completed, we are recreating it now. Because if you look in any Indigenous community across the country, kids are still being taken away from their homes, their families, and their communities. Only now it's called, the child welfare system. So we've essentially recreated, that which, disconnected us, from the spirit of who we are. So, and if we don't resolve it now, today, in the future, it's going to continue to show up in the, if we don't resolve it in the present, it's going to continue to show up in the future. And it's the same for Canada. Like, if we don't fully resolve, this thing around residential school for ourselves, then it's going to keep showing up in our lives. So our work handles the individual, because reconciliation is an individual process and you can see it. And that's why, it's been such a slow go, because you can't wave a magic wand, or give everybody money or do an apology and then this stuff is gone from everybody. It doesn't happen that way. It's an individual process. So our work looks at it from a place of responsibility. So if this is me over here, and I am a residential school student, and I'm a product of it because in my family. So for me, this is personal. This is my work. This is what I need to continue to kind of free myself from, because even though the event, maybe I didn't do that to myself, I did all the rest. And I keep recycling it in my space. So we show people that there is a choice. You don't have to have this stuff in your space 24/7. It's never going to go away. So it's not about erasing it or deleting it, because it can never be deleted. It's about time. Shorter time of this in your space than longer. Because a person can stay in this for days, weeks, months, years. There's people living in there thinking this is what's real here. So for me, it's about shorter times that to have this triggered. And that's a personal responsibility, spirit. And that's why, we've been still working 20 years later, because it's an individual thing. It's tools. And so what we do is we identify all of these for people. So they're all individuals. So I have a name for this, a name for this, a name for all of these things that are particular to me. And the reason we get people to name them is because you can't let go of what you don't own. So this stuff is in my space. So I have to own that and be responsible for that, instead of blaming somebody else for this being there. And that is huge. That is power. Then it means that you're not the victim. It's a step beyond kind of victimhood. right? So then you take your power back, because even if you get triggered, you're not handing your power over to someone who triggered you or an event that triggered you. You're owning that. And then it'll stay as long as you say. And so that is that's a huge paradigm shift for a lot of people who don't realize that they do have a choice, whether they can keep that or let it go. And we bring it forward from a place that, and a lot of this is in our language. So the teachings of this are in our languages, because there is no word for hate. There's no word like that for resentment. The closest you can get to it is it's a word that means, okay, you'll feel that temporarily, but the understanding is you're harming yourself, and that's why it's temporary. You're allowed to hold it a little while, but you're harming yourself. And so the idea is that it's a temporary feeling. It's not, to set up a tent and live there. And so when we lost our language, we also got disconnected from those types of teachings, because everything that we need to know about how to live and how to live in a place of peace is in the language. So returning to spirit kind of brings those teachings to life in a really practical way. It's like the 10 commandments. Okay, here's the laws you got to live by, but nobody tells you how to do it. Nobody tells you okay, how do you love, your mother and father when they were crappy? So no one tells you how to do that. And it's the same with the 7 teachings. So there's love and respect, but no, they tell you have to live that way, but not the how.
Not the how.
So this is exactly. And then the how is the most important, right? And how do I do that? And so for us, this is a process that kind of really spells it out for people. Well, this is the first tool. This is how you let go. This is what you're letting go of. This is identifying. And awareness is a big thing in that. The goal is, for people to start taking their power back. And even with forgiveness, there's a lot of Indigenous people today that's like, oh, I'll never forgive, I'll never let go. Because we have a misconception that if we let go, that's saying we condone it, or we saying it's okay, or we're not willing to let go of the claim for revenge. But meanwhile, it's like an acid, right? That we're drinking all this resentment and this anger, but we're expecting the other people to suffer for it. So we bring forward even forgiveness from a place of choice, that you're not forgiving for them, you're forgiving for you, because you want peace in your life. And so the bottom line for us is that reconciliation means peace for yourself. If you don't have peace with yourself, then, you can't give away what you don't have. So our work actually looks at all of the underlying causes. What is in the way?
I think that's a really good approach to handling a very, very complex situation like we have between the relationships between non-Indigenous and Indigenous folks and the systems that did take advantage. Because if we're in this constant infighting, and it can be a struggle as a queer man, we're here in Pride Month, and we're hearing a lot of rhetoric from individuals. It can be hard to be to try and see them from a point of view and work towards, because you're right, there is a lot of emotions that can come up when you're having I'll say conversation with someone.
Well, and that's actually a really good example, so my daughter is gay. So I go to this gathering to learn, to understand, right? To even let go of my own biases, my own assumptions around it. Because I come from a small community, and you know that. And plus I'm from a totally different generation too. Anyway, so I go to this event, but then I messed up the acronym and I didn't say them right. And I got shamed. And I got like, oh my God, like, right. And I felt so like, I felt bad, one, because I messed it up. But one, I was nervous and I'd never been, and I was there to learn, and I was,
I mean, to be fair, the acronym is very complicated and changing all the time.
in my opinion, right? So, I was treated with like no like intolerance, right? And impatience. And I get that, but I was learning. So that's the event. So there's me, that's the event. Then I start creating a story because there's feelings attached to it. It's embarrassment, it's awkwardness, it's uncomfortable. And then I start to get angry that I'm like, holy, like what I'm okay. So I messed it up, like, and then, so then I start building my, hey, and you can see it. So then, and the idea is that that's mine, right? Because that conversation, I'm doing that. So then the rest of the day, I click into my already knowing, I'm like, seeing who else is going to reject me here? Who else is like, going to treat me like that? There's one. And there could be 99 people that are like, hey, I'm so glad you're here. Like, yeah, it's like, you're awesome for like learning. And then one person would be like, who am I going to focus on, the 99 or the one? Right. And that's how it gets built. So then, I might walk away from there with the point of view, like, oh my gosh, they're so intolerant. Like, I'll never.
It's so hard to handle these situations because yes, people can explode like those triggers, and it can be really hard when you're dealt with things in your past of bigotry, discrimination, hate towards another group.
Exactly. That's my point, right? So here I am, and here's somebody who maybe their parent wasn't, and then that gets triggered, and boom, that brings like all that stuff, whatever that reminds them of. So then that brings all of their stuff to the forefront, which it previously wasn't there. So it is these triggers. And what I'm saying is it happens everywhere, in every situation. It's not an Indigenous thing, it's a human thing.
And which is why I've been challenging myself. I have preconceptions, as I myself have religious trauma, which makes me very empathetic with residential schools. Not to say that the situations are similar in any means, but I can understand trauma from there. But understanding it is not all individuals, and if someone is using hateful rhetoric or language, it's because of a system that they're in. It doesn't mean they can't change.
I think that's the distinction that gets lost on a lot of people. The church itself is not a human, right? It's an institution that is made up of individuals. So if you want to transform the church, then you have to start with the individuals, because it's an individual process.
Sometimes you're not going to be able to come to a conclusion with someone. It's, as humans, there are some times that no matter what, we're never gonna get along with some individuals, and that's okay. The important thing is to remember to not explode yourself afterwards, and move forward, understand that situation, and then you can approach the next conversation in a new, enlightened manner.
And it doesn't mean that you can't still be in a relationship with people if you differ in one area, in one point of view.
As someone on the left, I don't agree with everything that some of my friends say. They don't agree everything with I believe, but we understand, we have more that we like or have in common than we have opposing, and that means our relationship can work and be positive.
Yeah, and I think, and so for me, it's like, you don't have to agree 100%, because nothing is black and white. There is always shades. Like, because when I hear the reasons, right? So it's like, well, why would you trust the government? Because 500 years of history has said we should not trust them. Every time we think we should, we've looked back. Residential school is a big one. That was good for us. That was the law. Everybody was on board with sending us there. And I'm sure there was people who didn't agree, that they didn't want their kids to go there, and they were the wing nuts. of the time, right? They got arrested, they got whatever. So how is this any different? So, like for me, yeah, we were locked in our community, couldn't leave, right? There's blockades. Well, doesn't that sound like the Indian past? You know what I mean? And so it's like, okay, right? So, and it's still being able to, be in relationship with people, even though, yeah, they may make valid points, because a lot of people do. But the idea and the skills that we teach people is around their point of view, like being responsible for it. So if you let your stuff go, so you can have a conversation with somebody who believes something different, just to let it go for like 5 minutes or 2 minutes, however long that conversation lasts, and allow new information to come in. If you take some, oh, okay, that makes sense. Oh, okay. And then you reform your point of view, it's still your point of view. And so the idea is just to keep putting it aside in these situations to bring and to keep the conversation turning, which is the essence of reconciliation. Because when there's no reconciliation, there's no conversation. There's not even a willingness to have a conversation with somebody who doesn't agree with what you agree with. And that's where we fail. So what we do is we teach people how to set aside theirs, just long enough to have one conversation. And it's that skill that's needed through life, because there's going to be tons more situations when you don't agree, with someone else, and especially in your family.
Fantastic. So Lisa, you mentioned that there's a reconciliation event taking place next week.
Yeah, we are heading to BC, to Victoria, to do a reconciliation with the Diocese of Victoria. And in preparation for that reconciliation, we've had a couple of one-day events. We've had 2 Indigenous workshops, and we've also had 1 non-Indigenous workshop. And so the coming together is going to be next week. And so we'll bring those 2 groups together for our reconciliation. And when we started the partnership, it was because of Kamloops. But it ties in really nicely with now with the Pope's anticipated visit next month. Because I think for a lot of people, both Indigenous and non-Indigenous, they're kind of wondering, how is his visit? How is that going to, impact relationships and everything that we've done so far in terms of reconciliation in this country, or maybe even highlight some of the gaps.
Lisa, it has been fantastic talking with you. I really appreciate the work that Returning to Spirit is doing. Where can people go to find out more information?
Well, you can go to our website, which is www.returningtospirit.org.
Have a story you want us to share, a community we should highlight? Leave a comment on our social media, or reach out to us on our website. I'm Ryan Funk. This was You Talk, and have yourself a good one.